The bread was already golden by the time Maggie Calloway sat down at her machine. 5:47 in the morning. The back room of Sunrise Bakery smelled like yeast and warm butter, and the old fluorescent light above her workstation flickered once, twice, then held. Maggie didn't look up. She threaded the needle by feel, the way she'd been doing for 11 years in this same chair, at this same table, under this same light. Her fingers moved on their own. They always did. The front of the bakery belonged to Mrs. Petrov, a round, breathless woman who could frost a dozen pastries and scold a delivery driver at the same time without losing her place in either task. The back room belonged to Maggie. Just her, the machine, a rack of canvas aprons in various states of disaster, and above her workstation, pinned with a single thumbtack, a school photo of a boy with dark eyes and ink-stained fingers. Danny, 14 years old, currently asleep 3 subway stops away in their apartment, probably on top of his homework. Maggie smiled at the photo the way she did every morning. Not wide, just enough. She was not a woman who took up space. She knew that about herself without bitterness. Customers came through the front door, bought their rye loaves and their honey rolls, left tips on the counter, and never once wondered who kept Mrs. Petrov's aprons from falling apart at the seams. That was fine. Maggie had long ago made peace with being the person behind the curtain. She hummed while she worked. Something without a name, something she'd hummed so long it had become part of the room. By 8:15, the morning rush was loud enough to hear through the wall. The bell above the front door rang every 40 seconds. Mrs. Petrov called out orders in a voice built for stadiums. Maggie kept her head down, turning a hem on a tablecloth for the Friday dinner service. Then she heard him. Not his words, exactly. The wall swallowed those. But the voice itself. Flat. Certain. The voice of someone who had not asked a question in years, only issued conclusions. Move the meeting to 11. No, 11. Tell Marcus if he can't hold a number for 2 hours, I'll find someone who can. The bell rang. Silence dropped like a curtain. A minute later, Mrs. Petrov appeared in the doorway between the rooms, already untying and retying her apron out of nervous habit. Maggie dear, can you come clear the end counter? I've got a tray stuck. Maggie set down the tablecloth, wiped her hands on her work apron and came through. The front was warm and bright and smelled powerfully of cardamom. 2 customers waited at the register. Mrs. Petrov was wrestling with a tray of poppy seed rolls. At the far end of the counter, a single stool sat empty. On it, a slim black wallet. Maggie picked it up the way she picked up everything, quietly, without drama. She set it on the counter beside the register and opened it, looking for an ID to call after him. No cash, a platinum credit card, the kind that has no numbers printed on the front. A business card, heavy stock, minimal text, Ethan Cole, Chief Executive Officer, Cole Meridian Group. And behind the card, folded twice, careful as a secret, a photograph. Maggie's thumb caught the edge of it before she'd made a decision to look. It unfolded in 3 slow creases, a courthouse, steps, noon light coming hard off pale stone. A young man in a dark jacket, laughing at something just off camera, his hand reaching back toward a girl in a simple white dress. No veil. A small bunch of grocery store daisies held in both hands. She was looking at him, not the camera. The bread oven hummed, the bell above the door did not ring. Maggie stood very still, her thumb pressed flat against the edge of the photograph, and she noticed, from somewhere far away, that her hand had stopped moving entirely. The hum she always carried inside her, that quiet, nameless song, had stopped too. She knew the dress, she knew the daisies, she knew the exact weight of that bouquet because she had carried it herself, because she had stood exactly there, on those steps, on a Tuesday in October, 22 years old and certain she was the luckiest woman alive. She looked at the girl's face for a long time. Then she looked at the man, then she looked at the business card again. Ethan Cole. The oven ticked. Mrs. Petrov called something from the back. A customer asked about the sourdough. Maggie did not move. Her lips parted. The words came out barely above a breath, barely enough to exist at all, swallowed immediately by the warm bakery air. That's me. She stood behind the counter for a full minute, maybe longer. Mrs. Petrov called again, louder this time, asking about the rye loaves, and Maggie answered without hearing herself speak. Her fingers held the photograph at its edges, the way you hold something that might dissolve if you press too hard. 12 years. She had not said his name out loud in 12 years. She was 22 when she met him. Working alterations at a small shop on West 31st, a place called Needle and Thread that smelled of chalk marks and steam. Her boss, a Hungarian woman named Eva, had taught her everything. How to read the grain of fabric. How to take in a shoulder seam without the customer ever knowing it had been touched. Ethan Cole walked in on a Thursday evening, 20 minutes before closing. He had a torn jacket, a good one, charcoal wool, Italian cut, the kind of jacket that cost more than Maggie made in 2 months. "The lining's coming apart," he said. She looked at it. "I can have it ready by Friday." He came back Friday, then the following Tuesday with a pair of trousers, then the week after that with a coat that didn't need anything done at all. "There's nothing wrong with this coat," she told him. "I know," he said. And he smiled like a boy who had been caught, not like a man who was ashamed of it. He kept coming back. 6 times total. Each time with something that didn't quite need fixing. Each time staying a little longer than the errand required. He told her his name was just Ethan. She didn't ask for more. She liked that he sat on the little stool near the window and read while she worked. She liked that he didn't talk too much. She liked that he laughed at her jokes the way people laugh when something actually surprises them. "You don't seem like someone who belongs in a place like this," she said once, meaning the tiny steam-filled shop. "What kind of place do I belong in?" "I don't know. Somewhere with marble floors." He got very quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I hate marble floors." They were married on a Tuesday in October. A Brooklyn courthouse. A judge named Harrigan who smelled faintly of coffee and got her name right on the first try. Ethan wore the charcoal jacket she had mended. She wore a white dress she had sewn herself from a bolt of cotton she'd been saving. There were no guests. There was no party. There was just the two of them on the courthouse steps and a man passing by who offered to take their picture, and Ethan holding the little bouquet she'd bought from a bodega on the corner, and both of them laughing because neither of them could believe they were actually doing it. "This is insane," Ethan said. "I know," Maggie said. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Are you?" "No," he said. "That's what scares me." They had 3 days. He cooked eggs on the second morning and burned every single one, and she laughed until her stomach hurt, and he stood there with the spatula, perfectly serious, saying, "I want you to know I'm usually excellent at this." On the 3rd evening, he sat on the floor with his back against her couch and said quietly, like it cost him something to admit it, "I've never felt like myself until now." She remembered thinking, "I will remember this sentence for the rest of my life." She was right. On the 4th morning, she woke up and the apartment was very still. The kind of still that means something has already happened. The kind of still that arrives after, not before. He was gone. On the kitchen table, folded once, written on the back of a grocery receipt, because there was no other paper. "I'm sorry. You deserve better. Don't look for me." No signature. He hadn't needed one. She waited a month. She told herself he would come back. She told herself there was an explanation. She told herself a lot of things in that month. Standing at the steam press at Needle and Thread, marking chalk lines on other people's clothes, hemming other people's celebrations. Then she found out she was pregnant. She never filed for divorce. She wasn't sure why, exactly. Partly she didn't know how. Partly she couldn't afford a lawyer. Partly there was something inside her that said, "This will not make sense to any judge in any courtroom because it barely makes sense to me." She named the boy Daniel. She told him his father was gone before he was born, which was true enough, which covered most of it. She built everything from nothing. A needle and thread and 14 years, and one small fierce boy who looked at broken things and figured out how to make them stronger. She had not been looking for Ethan Cole this morning. She had been looking for a dropped apron pin. And now Maggie closed the wallet, slowly, carefully. The way you close something you don't trust yourself to open again. She slipped it into her apron pocket. She looked at the bread oven. The oven looked back, warm and indifferent. "I have to return it," she said quietly. "That's all. I'll return it and leave." Her hands were shaking. The subway ride took 31 minutes. Maggie counted the stops because counting kept her hands still. She had not changed her clothes. She had thought about it had stood for 1 full minute in front of her locker in the back of the bakery, and then decided against it. She was not going there to impress anyone. She was going to return a wallet, that was all. There was still flour on her left sleeve. She noticed it on the escalator going up from the station. She brushed at it once, then left it alone. The Col Meridian Tower was made of glass and steel and the specific kind of silence that costs money. The revolving door was heavy. The lobby floor was marble, pale gray, polished so bright that Maggie could see herself in it. She did not look down for long. The receptionist sat behind a curved desk like a judge behind a bench. She was young and blonde and wearing earrings that probably cost more than Maggie's rent. Her name tag said Brooke. Brooke looked up, looked at the cardigan, looked at the flower, looked back at her screen. "Deliveries go around the side," she said. "I'm not delivering anything," Maggie said. "I need to speak with Ethan Cole." Brooke's eyes moved back to Maggie's face, slower this time. "Are you a guest of the building?" "No. I found something that belongs to him, his wallet. I'd like to return it personally." A pause, small and deliberate. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. I found his wallet this morning. I just want to—" "Mr. Cole doesn't accept walk-ins." Brooke reached for her phone. "I can take the item for you." "It has something personal inside," Maggie said. "I'd prefer to give it to him directly." Brooke set the phone down. She looked at Maggie the way people look at something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Not angry, exactly, just tired. "Ma'am," she said, "Mr. Cole doesn't receive walk-ins from—" She let the pause sit there. She let it do the work. 2 security guards appeared from somewhere to the left. They were large and professional and not unkind, which somehow made it worse. A small cluster of suited employees near the elevators had slowed down. Not stopping, just slowing. The way people slow for an accident. Maggie stood still. Her hands were at her sides. "I found his wallet," she said again. Quiet, clear, like she was explaining something simple to someone who would understand eventually. "It has personal photographs in it. I walked here on my lunch break to return it. I am not a threat. I would like 5 minutes." One of the guards stepped forward, and then the elevator opened. Ethan Cole walked out mid-sentence, talking to 2 men in charcoal suits. He was exactly as she had not allowed herself to imagine him. Older now, sharper at the edges, wearing a watch that caught the lobby light. He moved like a man who had never once worried about where his next meal was coming from. He saw the scene at the desk. His eyes found Maggie, and he stopped. Not a stumble, not a slow recognition, a full, complete, total stop. The 2 executives took 2 more steps before they realized they were walking alone. They turned. They looked at him. He did not look at them. His face did something fast and complicated. Recognition. Then something older than recognition. Then, like a curtain dropping. Nothing. Just the smooth, composed face of a man who ran a company with 4,000 employees. He crossed the lobby. The guard stepped back. Brooke sat up straighter. Ethan held out his hand. Maggie placed the wallet in it. She was careful not to let their fingers touch. He opened it, looked inside. His jaw shifted. He closed it. He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. Flat, corporate, the voice of a man ending a meeting. The lobby was very quiet. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. Slowly, almost theatrically, he produced a stiff cream envelope, the kind that costs $4 per sheet, and held it out between 2 fingers like an afterthought. "My wedding is Saturday." His voice was easy, generous. There was a smile at the corners of his mouth that did not touch anything else on his face. "Consider yourself invited. Open invitation." His tone said everything, his words didn't. "You won't come. You can't come. This is a performance, and you are the prop." Maggie looked at the envelope. She took it. She looked at him. "Congratulations, Ethan," she said, his first name. Quiet as a key turning in a lock. Something moved across his face, fast, like a shadow crossing water, gone before it fully arrived. Maggie turned. She walked to the heavy revolving door. She pushed through it and into the noise and gray of Midtown. She did not look back. Behind her, in the marble lobby, the elevator door stood open and waiting. The subway ride home took 40 minutes. Maggie stood the whole way, holding the overhead bar, the envelope pressed flat against her side inside her coat. She didn't open it on the train. She didn't look at it at all. Carroll Gardens was already going dark when she climbed the steps from the station. The bodega on the corner had its lights on. Someone was cooking something with garlic 2 floors above the street. Normal things, safe things. She pushed open the door to their building and walked up 3 flights. She could hear him before she even got the key in the lock. Not music, not television, the soft scratch of pencil on paper, and the occasional quiet sound he made when he was concentrating. A small exhale, almost like a sigh, but not quite. Maggie opened the door. Danny was at the kitchen table. Blueprints covered every inch of it. Real ones, not school drawings. Large folded sheets with measurements and load notations and tiny careful labels in his handwriting. He had his left elbow on the table and his chin in his hand, and he was absolutely still, studying something in the upper left corner of the page. He looked up. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. She hung up her coat. She did not take the envelope out of the pocket. She stood in the doorway between the hall and the kitchen and looked at her son. He had her coloring, dark hair, her mother's nose, but his hands were something else entirely. Long fingers. A double-jointed thumb he'd complained about since he was small because it made certain grips awkward. He was already taller than her by almost 4 inches, and he was only 14. "You eat?" she asked. "I made pasta. There's some left." "Good." She sat down across from him. She didn't move any of the blueprints. She just found a small clear corner and put her hands there. "What is this one?" she asked. "The community center, 2nd revision." He turned the sheet slightly so she could see. "They want me to rethink the east load-bearing wall. I think they are wrong actually, but I want to show the math before I say so." "You're going to tell a professional firm they're wrong." "I'm going to show them the math," he said. "There's a difference." Maggie almost smiled, almost. She waited until he went to bed. Then she sat at the kitchen table with her phone and typed 3 words into the search bar. Meridian Alternative Structures. The results came up quickly. A small firm, founded 6 years ago, focused on sustainable, low-cost community architecture. Good reputation, a few awards, the kind of company she'd felt good about when she signed the contract. She scrolled down to the ownership section. Saint-Felix, a silent majority stakeholder. Fonse H. Cole Consulting. Maggie put the phone face down on the table. She sat very still for a long time. Then she picked it up again and looked at it again, in case she had misread. She hadn't. She did not sleep well. In the morning, before Danny was up, she found the contract in the drawer where she kept important papers. She found the contact number. She dialed it. 1 ring. 2. Meridian Alternative Structures, Helen Cole's office. Maggie's throat tightened. "I'd like to speak with..." She stopped. "With Helen Cole, please." A pause, longer than a normal pause. Then a different voice came on. Older, careful, like someone who had been rehearsing this moment and was still not sure they were ready. "Mrs. Calloway." Not a question. She already knew who was calling. "I've been hoping you'd call," the voice said. "My name is Helen Cole. I think it's time we spoke in person." Maggie gripped the phone with both hands. "You knew," she said. It was not a question either. A long silence. When Helen Cole spoke again, her voice was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Tired the way people get when they have been carrying something heavy for a very long time. "I've known since he was 2 years old," she said. "I found your address in Ethan's things when I was clearing out his apartment, after he came back to us." A breath. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." Maggie stood in her kitchen in the early morning quiet. Danny asleep in the next room. Blueprints still spread across the table. She opened her mouth and found for just a moment that she had no words at all. The restaurant Helen had chosen was the kind of place that didn't try too hard. White tablecloths, soft light, a menu without prices on the copy they handed Maggie. She noticed that. Helen was already seated when Maggie arrived. 67 years old, and still the kind of woman who made a room feel smaller just by being in it. Not in a cruel way. In the way of someone who had learned, over a very long time, how to take up exactly the space she needed. "Thank you for coming," Helen said. Maggie sat down, didn't reach for the menu. "You found us when Danny was 2? she said. That's 12 years, Helen. Helen didn't flinch. She had clearly prepared herself for this. Yes, she said, 12 years. Then start there. Helen folded her hands on the table. She wore no rings. Maggie noticed that too. Richard found out about the marriage 3 days after the wedding. Helen began. I don't know how. Richard always had people watching Ethan. He considered it management. She paused. He called Ethan into his office. I wasn't there. I only heard what Ethan told me later, and what I'd pieced together after. What did he tell him? That if Ethan stayed married to you, he would be cut from everything. The company, the trust, his grandfather's name on every door. All of it gone. She looked at the table. But that wasn't the worst part. Maggie waited. Richard had you investigated. Before the conversation, he knew you worked alterations. He knew you had no family with money, no connections, nothing that could fight back. Helen's voice was careful, like someone reading from a document they had memorized. And then he told Ethan that you had been paid to befriend him, that it was arranged, that someone had sent you to get close to his son. The restaurant was quiet. A fork touched a plate somewhere across the room. That's a lie, Maggie said. I know. I met him at a laundromat. He couldn't figure out the machine. I know, Maggie. He made me laugh for 45 minutes waiting for a spin cycle. I know. Helen's voice broke, just slightly, at the edge. He believed it. He was 24. He loved his father the way children love parents who withhold things, desperately. And he believed it for long enough to write you that note and walk out the door. How long is long enough? 6 months, Helen said. By the time the story fell apart, Richard had been sloppy. The fabricated records didn't hold. You were gone. No forwarding address. The shop owner said you'd left the city. Maggie thought about that winter. Danny barely walking, a sublet in Crown Heights, the decision not to leave a trail. I wasn't hiding from Ethan, she said quietly. I was hiding from being found and told it was my fault. Helen nodded, like she had expected exactly that answer. Richard had told him that finding you would cost him everything that remained between them. And Ethan, she stopped. He was not strong enough yet. He is now, but he wasn't then. And you? Maggie asked. Where were you in all of this? The question landed. Helen didn't move away from it. I didn't fight hard enough, she said. That is the only honest answer I can give you. I found you 2 years later. I saw Danny, and I chose silence. She looked up. But I chose also to watch. A grant for the community arts program Danny tested into. An anonymous entry in that engineering competition last spring. She exhaled. I was waiting for a moment I wasn't sure would ever come. Richard is dead, Maggie said. It wasn't a question. Helen had said it on the phone. 4 years ago. There is nothing stopping the truth now. Nothing except Ethan himself. She paused. And Saturday. Maggie was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the waiter came and went without either of them ordering. Then she said, he handed me that invitation like it was funny, Helen. Like showing up would be the most embarrassing thing I could do. Helen nodded slowly. I know, she said. I think... She picked up her water glass, set it down again. I think we should go. Maggie drove home alone. The city moved past her windows in streaks of yellow and gray, and she didn't hear any of it. Danny was in the kitchen when she got back. He had spread his drawings across the table again. Those careful pencil grids. The load calculations written in his small, neat hand. He looked up when she came in. You were gone a long time, he said. I know. She set her keys down. Danny, can you put those aside for a minute? He looked at her face. Then he stacked the papers without a word and folded his hands on the table, those long hands, flat and still. She sat across from him. She told him everything, not the dramatic version, not the version where she was a victim and Ethan was a monster. She told him the plain, true version, a courthouse, a simple white dress, a boy who loved her and was terrified of his father, 3 days of something that felt like a life, and then a note on a kitchen counter. Your father was a young man who was lied to, she said, and he was not yet brave enough to find out the truth himself. That is not an excuse, but it is what happened. Danny listened the way he always listened. Completely. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shift in his seat. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Then he said, "Does he know I exist?" "No." "Are we going to tell him?" Maggie looked at her son. This person she had built from nothing. This boy who spent his Saturdays designing structures meant to hold communities together. Bridges, frames, foundations. Things that bear weight without breaking. "I think he should know," she said. "What happens after that is up to him." Danny nodded slowly. He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up. "Okay," he said. "A beat. Mom, can I bring my portfolio?" Maggie almost laughed. The sound came up before she could stop it. Not quite a laugh, but close, the kind that lives right next to crying. "Yes, baby," she said. "You can bring your portfolio." He nodded, satisfied, and reached for his drawings. The next morning, she called the attorney Helen had arranged. Her name was Carol Reyes, and she had a voice like someone who had heard every version of every story and was not surprised by any of them. Maggie explained the situation in plain terms. Carol was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "And there has been no divorce filing, ever, by either party." "No." "And the marriage was legally performed, witnessed, registered?" "Yes, in Brooklyn, 12 years ago." Another pause, not a long one. "Mrs. Cole," Carol said, and she said the name carefully, like she knew what it meant to say it out loud. "Legally, that is still your name. You understand what that means for Saturday?" "I do." "You don't have to do anything dramatic," Carol said. "You don't have to file anything before then. You don't have to make a scene. You just have to be there." She paused. "The rest will follow." Maggie held the phone against her ear for a moment after Carol stopped speaking. Outside, Danny was at the table again. She could see him through the doorway, head down, pencil moving, building something careful and true out of empty space. "All right," Maggie said quietly. "Saturday." The drive to Connecticut took 2 hours. Maggie sat in the back of Helen's car and watched the city dissolve into highway and then into something greener, quieter, older. Danny had his sketchbook open on his knees. He wasn't drawing the wedding. He was drawing the bridge they'd passed outside Hartford. "Mom?" he said without looking up. "Is this going to be bad?" Maggie considered lying. She decided against it. "It's going to be honest," she said. "That's different." He nodded, like that was a reasonable answer. It probably was, for him. Helen sat in the front, straight-backed, saying nothing. Patricia Osei sat beside Maggie with her leather folder on her lap and her hands folded over it, calm as a Sunday morning. The estate appeared around a long curve of private road, white flowers everywhere, stone walls. A string quartet audible from the parking area, guests in colors that cost money just to dye. Maggie smoothed her dress. She had finished the last seam at 2 in the morning. Deep blue. Clean lines. No decoration it didn't need. "You look right," Helen said quietly, without turning around. "You look exactly right." The wedding coordinator intercepted them at the entrance. Young woman, clipboard, earpiece. Her smile went rigid the moment she saw the group. Then Vivienne appeared, 30 years old. Ivory dress. The kind of composed that comes from never having lost. She looked at Maggie the way people look at a stain on a tablecloth. "This is a private event," Vivienne said. "I don't know who let you in, but—" "I'm family," Helen said. Vivienne stopped. She knew the name. Everyone in that room knew the name. Helen Cole. 3 charitable boards, a hospital wing. A woman who could silence a room just by entering it. Vivienne recovered, barely. "Of course, Helen." Then she looked at Maggie. At Danny. Something sharpened behind her eyes. "But your guests will need to wait outside." A small, practiced smile. "The help doesn't attend, darling." Danny looked up from examining a ceiling corbel above the doorway. He studied it for one more second. Then he looked at Vivian the way he looked at load calculations that didn't add up. "I'm not the help," he said pleasantly. "I'm the groom's son." The room held its breath. Vivian laughed, a short, bright sound with no warmth in it. "That's absurd." Then Ethan walked in from the side corridor. He stopped. He saw his mother first, then Patricia with her folder, then Maggie in the blue dress, standing like she had every right in the world to be standing there, which she did. Then he saw Danny. The boy wasn't looking at him with rage or accusation. He was just looking, patient, clear-eyed. The way you look at something you have already understood. Ethan's best man appeared at his elbow and said something low and urgent into his ear. Ethan didn't hear it. He was looking at Danny's hands. The long fingers wrapped around the sketchbook. The left thumb bent just slightly the wrong direction at the joint. His own hands. His own thumb, 12 years away, and there they were. The string quartet was still playing outside. Someone's champagne glass clinked against another. Ordinary sounds happening in a world that had just shifted on its axis. Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He found his voice. It was quieter than anyone in that room had ever heard from him.
"Can we?" He stopped, started again. "I need a few minutes. Please." His best man touched his arm. "Ethan, the guests." "5 minutes," Ethan said. "Just 5 minutes." Vivian was watching from across the room.
She was smart. She read faces for a living, professionally and personally. She read his face now, and something in her went very still. She gave a small nod. One nod. Then she turned and spoke quietly to the wedding coordinator, and the room began to breathe differently. Guests drifting, conversations resuming, the moment suspended rather than shattered. A small sitting room off the main hall. Wood paneling. A window with afternoon light. A table that was meant for nothing more important than setting down a glass. They sat. Ethan, Maggie, Danny, Helen, Patricia. Patricia opened her folder without ceremony and placed a single document on the table. A marriage certificate. Brooklyn Courthouse.
October the 14th, 12 years ago. Ethan looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at his mother. Helen's voice was steady. She had practiced this. She had earned the right to be steady. "Your father found out," she said. "He paid someone to lie to you. I knew what he did, and I said nothing. I have spent 12 years trying to partially repair what that silence cost." 3 sentences, every one of them true. Ethan's face did something that no one in his office had ever seen it do. He looked at Maggie. "I believed him," he said. "I know," she said. "That's not an excuse."
"I know that, too." The room was quiet except for the faint sound of the string quartet, still playing somewhere out in the hall, beautiful and completely unaware. Then Danny reached into his bag.
He placed his portfolio on the table beside the marriage certificate. Not a power move, just, this is what he brought. This is who he is. "I'm Danny," he said. He looked at Ethan directly, not with anger, not with need, just clearly. "I design structures. Mom taught me that the best ones are built to last, not to impress." Ethan looked at the portfolio. Then he looked at the boy. And something broke open in him. Not guilt. Guilt was too small a word. Grief, enormous and overdue. For 3 days in an apartment with bad eggs and real laughter. For a family that had existed and been deliberately taken apart by a man who was now dead and could not be asked why. He didn't cry. But his voice, when it came, was not the voice he used in boardrooms. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Not want, need. Maggie was quiet for a moment. "Nothing, Ethan. We came because Danny deserved to know the truth, and so did you." She paused. "But if you want to know your son, that's a door you'll have to earn the right to knock on." Slowly, on his terms, Danny nodded once. Outside, the string quartet finished their piece. A bit of silence. Then they began again. Vivian ended the engagement that afternoon. Quietly, without a scene. She was pragmatic, and she had always known, somewhere, that Ethan was carrying something he had never named. She wished him well and meant it, mostly. The legal matter of the marriage was resolved through mediation over the following months. Maggie accepted a settlement, not for herself. It went directly into Danny's educational trust. Ethan began the slow, uncertain work of showing up. He attended a school presentation on load-bearing arches in November. He learned badly to text a teenager. He made terrible eggs once in a kitchen that wasn't his, and Danny said nothing except, "We have hot sauce," and pushed it across the counter. Helen became a grandmother. Not in name yet. In practice, fully. And Maggie, in the back room of Sunrise Bakery, pinned a new photograph above her sewing machine. Not the courthouse couple. Herself and Danny at the engineering competition, both of them laughing, her hand on his shoulder. The old wallet photograph found a frame on Ethan's desk in the Cole Meridian Tower, not as a monument to what he lost, as the beginning of understanding what he still had the chance to build. A mother's love doesn't wait to be recognized. It just keeps building, quietly, until the structure is strong enough to hold everyone who finally finds their way home.